My parents have never liked my boyfriend. My dad literally offered him money to walk away from me. My mom, she accidentally spilled wine on him twice during family dinners and secretly created dating profiles for me behind my back. When James refused the bribe, they cut off my college tuition and said I deserved someone from our world, not some random guy from nowhere. Now, after everything, they're blowing up my phone, acting concerned about my behavior. James and I have been together for almost a year, and honestly, it's been the most genuine, healthy relationship I've ever had. We met in the most random way, during that massive storm last April. My Uber bailed while I was downtown. Rain was pouring, and I had no umbrella, because of course I didn't check the weather. I ducked into a little bookstore to stay dry, just wandering around, trying not to ruin the place with my soaked clothes. That's when this sweet guy working there started talking to me about the book I was holding. Somehow that turned into an hour-long conversation about childhood cartoons. He's a Batman, the animated series fan, which obviously is the correct answer. When the rain finally stopped, he offered me his umbrella, insisting I keep it, and said he only lived a couple blocks away. I tried to say no, but he just smiled and said I could bring it back later. So yeah, I had to return it. We exchanged numbers, met up for coffee that weekend, and honestly, that was it. It all felt easy, natural. James is kind, funny, driven, and he treats me with so much respect. He didn't grow up with money. Raised by a single mom in a tough neighborhood, he worked full-time while putting himself through community college. The guy never complains, even when life throws hard stuff his way. I admire that so much. Now here's where the drama starts. My parents? They're not full-on elitists, but let's just say they have expectations. We're not ultra-wealthy, but my dad's done well, and my mom comes from one of those families that think lineage matters. They paid for my private schooling and my college tuition, something I'm truly grateful for. But they act like that gives them a say in every part of my life. When I first brought up James, they acted polite, but I should have seen the red flags. My mom immediately asked where he went to school and what his parents did. When I said community college and that his mom worked as a nurse's aide, she made this face, like she'd smelled something sour. The first dinner with my family? A train wreck. My mom spilled red wine on his shirt 10 minutes after he walked in. He laughed it off, said it wasn't his interview shirt, trying to keep things light, but then she did it again at the next dinner, twice. Same exact accident. And both times, barely an apology. Just handed him a napkin with a little comment about stains being permanent. After that, she started sending me fun links to dating apps and articles about how relationships in your early 20s usually don't last. Then one day I borrowed her iPad, and there it was. Dating profiles of me. Using recent photos from my socials and cringe bios that made me sound like I was husband hunting for someone with a yacht. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. Just said she was keeping my options open and that James seemed nice, but not for the long run. I lost it. Told her she crossed every possible line. She said she was just trying to think of my future. I walked out, slammed the door, hard. Honestly, good. Maybe it knocked some sense into her. And then at Sunday dinner, because yes, we still do those, my dad started going off about how bookstores aren't sustainable businesses anymore and asked James if he'd thought about a more stable job. Mom added that I was too young to settle down and reminded me that my cousin Teresa just got engaged to someone whose family owns half their town. Through all this, James has been so patient, like next-level patient. He keeps saying he understands they're just being protective, but I can tell it's starting to wear on him. Last week on the way home, he was quiet. When I asked what was wrong, he finally said, "I don't think your parents will ever see me as good enough for you." And that absolutely broke my heart, because they're wrong. He is enough. He's more than enough. The final straw came last night. I was at my parents' house helping my dad set up his new laptop, because apparently if you're under 30, you're automatically tech support. I went to the kitchen to grab some water and heard them talking in the next room. What I heard made me freeze. My dad said, "That guy is just using her. He probably sees her as a way up." And my mom? She agreed. Said they needed to step in before things got out of hand. I was so stunned I dropped the glass I was holding. It shattered on the tile. They came rushing in, only to find me standing there with tears running down my face. And instead of apologizing, my dad doubled down. He said they were just worried about my future, that I deserved someone from our circle. I lost it. Fully lost it. I told them James has never taken advantage of me, never asked me for a dime. In fact, he insists on paying his share even though I currently earn more through my freelance work. He encourages my goals, listens, remembers the smallest things I mention, and surprises me with thoughtful little gifts that don't cost much but mean everything. I called them out, told them they were being judgmental and elitist. That if they couldn't respect my choices, they didn't get a say in my personal life. My mom had the nerve to say, "We're just trying to protect you from making a mistake." I told her the real mistake would be letting them scare me out of the best relationship I've ever had. My dad turned red and said I was being ungrateful after all they've done. I grabbed my stuff, walked out, and texted them later that I needed space. Since then, they've been sending wall of text messages about how I'm throwing away my future and being manipulated. The truth? I'm seriously considering moving in with James, but I'm scared of what that might mean. They still help with my student loans. I'm on their phone plan, their insurance. I don't want to rely on them financially, but let's be honest, my income doesn't quite cover everything yet. James thinks I should try to have one calm, honest conversation with them, but I'm afraid it'll just turn into another blow-up. Part of me wants to go no contact, just block everything. But they're still my parents. As toxic as they're being, I know in their own way, they think they're protecting me. But I'm done letting their version of protection wreck the most solid thing I've ever had. James is kind, loyal, and treats me like I matter. Like, truly matter. And that means more to me than family connections or someone's job title ever will. Should I sit them down and lay it all out? Or just accept the fallout and move on? Because honestly, losing their financial help would be hard. But losing James? That would be worse. Update. First off, thank you to everyone who left a comment on my last post. I read every single one. I even showed a few to James, and he just sat there, really quiet, like it meant the world to know people were actually rooting for us. That moment made something click for me. I realized something was still weighing on him. So the next night, while we were watching videos at his place, I turned to him during a break and asked directly, "Is there something you're not telling me?" He looked so uncomfortable. Then he finally said, "There's something I've been meaning to say, but I didn't know how." Turns out, last week, my dad called James and asked to meet for coffee. James said yes, thinking maybe he was finally trying to make an effort. Instead, my dad slid an actual check across the table and offered James $10,000 to break up with me and walk away. Like something out of a bad drama. James just stared at it. He pushed it back and told my dad he wasn't interested. Then, get this. My dad said he could make it $15,000. He literally tried to buy him off. James stood up, told him he loved me and wasn't going anywhere. My dad's response? He said something like, "Guys like you always leave when something better comes along." James walked out. But he didn't tell me right away because he was afraid it would destroy my relationship with my family. But the thing is, it already has. James didn't want to keep anything from me, and I could see how stressed he was, like he was scared I might not believe him. But I did. I was shaking, full body shaking from rage. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, even though it was past 11 p.m. He answered half asleep, but I didn't hold back. I asked him if he really thought my relationship was something he could just write a check to erase. At first he played dumb, but when I said the exact amount and the Starbucks location, he knew he was caught, and then he defended it. Said he was investing in my future and that he's seen how these things play out. Claimed James would take the money eventually. I was yelling so loud my neighbor knocked on the wall. James had to take the phone out of my hands before I smashed it. I couldn't sleep that night. James kept trying to soothe me, but I was too hurt, too angry. The next morning I texted my mom. I asked if she knew. She sent this long message saying they were just concerned that young relationships rarely last. And wouldn't it be better to know now if James was really committed? I replied that the only people treating me like a transaction were them, using money to try and control my life. That's when I knew I needed to face them in person. James offered to come, but I didn't want to escalate things even more. So I drove to their house alone. When I got there, they acted like I was the one spiraling. My mom reached out to hug me. I stepped back and told her not to. We sat in the living room and I let it all out. I told them I knew about the bribe and that I'd never been more disappointed in them. My dad actually said it was a test, to see if James was the real deal. I told him that wasn't a test, that was manipulation. My mom started crying, her classic move when she's backed into a corner, saying they just wanted what's best for me. So I asked, what exactly isn't good about James? Is it that he's kind, supportive, hardworking, honest? And my dad, without hesitation, said, "He's not from our circle, Megan." You deserve someone with background and connections who can elevate your future. I laughed, out loud. I told him James has done nothing but support my future. That, if our circle meant money, then their entire argument boiled down to status, not character. That's when my mom got defensive, said I was being naive. Love doesn't pay the bills, she snapped. I reminded her I've been financially independent for 2 years now through my freelance work, and she hit back with, yes, darling, but who paid for the education that allowed you to do that? And there it was, the guilt card, the thing I knew they'd eventually throw at me. My dad leaned forward with this cold, calculated look and told me they had made a decision. Either I came to my senses and ended things with James, or they'd stop paying for my final semester and cut off all financial support. I stood up so fast I knocked over a glass of water. I told them they couldn't buy me, and they definitely couldn't buy James. My dad stood up too, and suddenly we were shouting across the room. He kept saying I was being emotional, reckless, that I'd regret this. And I told him the only thing I regret is believing they ever cared more about me than their reputation. My mom tried to calm us down, but I was way past that. I asked straight up, if I stay with James, are you really cutting me off completely? My dad looked me in the eyes and said yes, that I needed to learn there are consequences to poor choices. So I grabbed my bag and told them that was all I needed to hear. As I headed to the door, my mom ran after me, crying, asking where I was going. I told her, home, to someone who respects me, not someone trying to control me. She grabbed my arm and tried to stop me, but I pulled away so hard I stumbled into a wall and knocked over some hideous vase. I didn't apologize. I didn't look back. I slammed the door behind me. I cried most of the drive back, wiped my face at every stoplight. By the time I pulled into the lot, I just sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to collect myself. When I walked in, James was waiting up. It was past midnight, but he didn't say a word. He just hugged me and held me while I cried again. Once I could finally speak, I told him everything, every detail. He got quiet, then asked me something I didn't expect. Are you sure you want to give up your tuition for me? Because I'd understand if you needed to focus on school. If we took a break, maybe we could reconnect after you graduate. And that just made me cry harder. Because even now, after everything, they still think he's using me. But he's the only one who's ever offered to let me go for my sake. That's love. And they'll never get it. Even while my parents were literally trying to pay him to leave me, James kept putting my needs first. He asked if I was absolutely sure. Probably 10 different times, like he needed to hear it again and again before he could believe I was choosing us over their control. I finally grabbed his face, looked him in the eyes and said, yes, I'm sure. Stop asking me. I've got just enough saved to cover about half of my final semester, if I budget carefully. James offered to lend me the rest, but I didn't want to start our life together with that kind of financial weight between us. So I've applied for emergency aid and I'm chasing every last-minute scholarship I can find. Worst case, I might have to take a semester off and work full-time. Not ideal when I was so close to graduating, but honestly, I'd rather delay than let my parents use money to dictate my life. A few of my freelance clients have offered me more hours, which helps. But the emotional toll? That's another story. My parents are still texting non-stop, my mom flipping between guilt and concern, and my dad dropping reality check lectures like he's running a business seminar. I finally muted the chat thread. I just can't take it right now. My younger sister Rose reached out. She said mom had been crying all day and wanted to know what happened. I gave her the condensed version. Even she, our family's golden child, the one who always plays by their rules, was horrified. Since my lease is up in 3 weeks anyway, I've started moving my things into James's place. We'd planned to move in together next month, but clearly that timeline moved up. His apartment is tiny and we're going to be on top of each other, like literally stepping over laundry piles and dodging furniture. But it's worth it. It's freedom. James has been incredible through all of this. He keeps saying, we'll figure it out. And I believe him. Yesterday, while we were packing some of my stuff, he found this old photo booth strip from our third date, the one where we made dumb faces the whole time. And he stuck it on his fridge with the biggest, goofiest smile. That moment right there, that's when I knew I'd made the right choice. So here's where we are. Broke, stressed, constantly exhausted, but together. I'm applying for a student loan, switching to a cheaper phone plan because I'm pretty sure I'll be off the family plan any day now, and starting to research affordable health insurance. If anyone has recommendations, I'd be grateful, because that's the next thing on my list. And also, can we just acknowledge how wild it is to offer someone actual money to break up with your daughter? Like, did they really think that would work? And if it had worked, what? Did they think I'd never find out? I keep replaying that conversation in my head, getting angry all over again. Second update. So, where do I even start? The last 6 months have been one massive emotional roller coaster. I've been meaning to post for ages, but life's been so hectic I'm lucky if I remember to charge my phone at night. But first, the biggest news. We survived. Somehow, some way, we made it through the financial freefall that came after my parents cut me off. It wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. But we're still standing. Still together. And honestly, as messed up as everything was, I've grown more in these past months than I ever thought possible. I've learned who I am outside their shadow. Let's start with school. That was the most urgent crisis. After a blur of late-night emails and 3 separate meetings with the financial aid office, I managed to scrape together enough emergency support and loans to cover the last semester. I had to drop one elective that required expensive materials I couldn't afford anymore, but I stayed on track to graduate. Living in James's 1-bedroom apartment was an adjustment. Let's just say we love each other, but sharing a bathroom the size of a closet with someone who owns more hair products than I do? Yeah, that was a new level of closeness. Also, yes, James has amazing hair. No, I'm not jealous. Much. Our first real fight came when I accidentally used his ridiculously fancy conditioner as shaving cream. In my defense, the bottles look the same and the lighting in the shower is awful. He didn't speak to me for 3 hours. It felt like a week, but we got over it. I picked up 2 new freelance clients and started working evening shifts at a cafe near campus. James picked up extra hours and started helping local businesses with their social media as a side hustle. Between the two of us, we were clocking over 140 hours a week, which meant we barely saw each other, except to collapse into bed and groan about our feet. Our diet for 2 months was mostly ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and leftover pastries I brought home from work. I dropped 10 pounds without even trying. Some days I was too tired to eat. James started prepping little snack boxes with eggs and cheese and would leave them in the fridge with heart-shaped Post-its. We were basically communicating through food and fridge notes. It was both adorable and kind of heartbreaking. My parents kept trying to reach out. Mostly my mom, once a week. I ignored most of her calls, but one day while walking to class, I finally picked up. She opened with this overly cheerful, "Hi, sweetie," like nothing had happened. I didn't play along, and within seconds, she pivoted to guilt-tripping. Said they were just worried, that they missed me and wanted to talk things through. And I told her, there's nothing to talk through. Not unless... When my mom finally called again, I thought maybe this time they were ready to take accountability. But no. Instead of apologizing for trying to bribe my boyfriend and threatening to cut me off, she said I was still being too emotional and that I needed to see things from a parent's perspective. I actually laughed, out loud, right there in the middle of the campus quad. I told her that if their idea of wanting the best for me meant controlling my relationship with money, then we clearly had very different definitions of best. That's when she dropped the real reason for the call. They were suddenly open to supporting me financially again, but only if I agreed to sit down with them and have a calm conversation about my future. So I asked her point blank, "Does that mean a future without James?" She paused, then said they just wanted me to keep an open mind. I hung up. No goodbye. Then had a full-on mini breakdown on a bench near the library. Because the truth? I was tempted. We were broke, stressed, emotionally drained. But I knew, deep down, that if I gave in now, I'd always be under their control. The one person who's truly kept me grounded through all this is my younger sister, Rose. She's still living at home, finishing high school, and honestly, she's been like my spy on the inside. According to her, my parents have been spinning this whole thing like I'm the one who chose to take some space, and that they're just patiently waiting for me to come to my senses. She even snuck me some of her babysitting money a couple times. I cried in the cafe break room reading that Venmo notification. I told her not to do it again. I don't want her risking anything, but just knowing she's quietly in my corner means more than I can explain. The most surreal moment? About 3 months into the mess, I ran into my mom at Target. I was there grabbing discount shampoo and generic cold meds because of course I caught something awful during finals, and she was there looking flawless with a cart full of things I used to take for granted. She froze when she saw me. I probably looked like I'd been run over by life. Messy bun, dark circles, James's oversized hoodie because all my laundry was dirty. For a second I thought she might walk the other way, but instead, she walked up and asked if I was okay. told me I looked tired. I said I had a cold and finals. And just like that, she slipped back into mom mode, offering to buy me real medicine, telling me I needed more sleep, more vitamin C. It almost felt normal. She even asked how school was going, and for a moment it felt like she was actually proud of me. But then, of course, she had to ruin it. She asked if I was still with that boy, with a tone that said everything her words didn't. I said yes. James and I were still together and still happy. Her whole expression changed. She reminded me the door was always open if I decided to be reasonable. Despite all the stress, despite everything we'd been through, I was thriving. Without the safety net of their money, I became laser-focused. Every class, every assignment. I was paying for this with my time, my effort, my resources, and it showed. I made the dean's list for the first time in my life. When I showed James my grades, he was so proud he literally picked me up and spun me around our tiny kitchen, almost knocking over our wobbly table. That moment will be burned in my memory forever. James has been unshakable through all of this. Even when we were running on empty, even when we were cranky or exhausted, he never once said, maybe they were right. Not once did he question whether this relationship was worth the cost. Instead, he kept doing the little things that held me together. Notes tucked into my textbooks, one flower on the kitchen counter from his morning walk, tea waiting for me when I got home from the library. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. James got offered a management position at the bookstore. The owner is planning to step back, and he told James he has the perfect mix of book knowledge and business instincts. It came with a real raise and actual benefits. After months of surviving on pennies and stress, it felt like we hit the jackpot. Around the same time, one of my freelance clients introduced me to someone at a small agency. They offered me a part-time position that I could do while finishing school. It's not big money, but it's consistent. And there's a real path to full-time after graduation. With both our incomes improving, we finally started looking for a slightly bigger place. Our lease was ending anyway, and while we'd made that shoebox of a studio work, we were both losing our minds from the lack of space. And then, we found it. A small but cozy one-bedroom that's still affordable, but with actual closets and a kitchen where 2 people can stand without bumping into each other. That alone felt like a dream. The day we signed the lease was a real turning point. We did that. Not with family money, not with handouts, just our own effort, our own grind. I may have teared up a little when the landlord handed over the keys. Okay, fine. I definitely cried. And yes, James has the photo to prove it. Me, red-faced, clutching keys, looking like I just won the lottery. Of course, the moment my parents realized I was actually making it on my own, they shifted gears again. My dad called me last week with this weird, not quite apology. He said something like, maybe I overreacted, but I still believe I was acting in your best interest. Then, as casually as he could manage, he brought up Jeffrey's son. Apparently he's back from law school, and wouldn't I remember him from some country club event years ago? I couldn't believe it. After everything, he was still trying to set me up with someone from their world like James didn't exist. I told him flat out, I'm happy. I'm with James. And unless he was calling to offer a real apology for trying to bribe my boyfriend and financially blackmail me, we had nothing more to talk about. He got defensive, said I was throwing away opportunities. I hung up. 5 minutes later, my mom texted me that I was being cruel to my father, who was offering an olive branch. I replied with a single sentence. An olive branch doesn't come with strings attached. Graduation is in 3 weeks, and I've been debating whether to even invite them. According to Rose, they've been telling extended family they'll be attending, like it's a done deal. Part of me doesn't want them there, doesn't want their presence overshadowing a moment I earned without them. But part of me worries I'll regret not giving them the chance. James says it's entirely my call. His mom, Sharon, an actual angel, is flying in. She's basically adopted me by now, and I don't want her joy to be drowned out by drama. It's a lot. Here's the weirdest part of all of this. Despite how hard it's been, I feel more like me than I ever did before. Every decision, from what I eat to where I live to who I love, has been mine. And even when it's scary or exhausting, there's a kind of freedom in that, a strength I didn't know I had. Final update. It's been a minute. I put off writing this because I wasn't sure how to tie it all together. But people kept asking, so here it is. Life is still messy. Some wins, some setbacks, and a whole lot of stuff I'm still figuring out. But graduation? That was huge. I ended up inviting my parents. Not because I was over everything, but because I didn't want to wonder what if. That morning I was a wreck. Hands shaking, couldn't even get my cap on right. James tried to help, but hair is not his area of expertise. Sharon showed up early, radiating pride and calm, which helped. They came. I spotted them in the back row. Mom in a designer dress, Dad in his power suit. They didn't cheer, didn't wave, just stood there like observers at a stockholder meeting. After the ceremony, while I was taking pictures with James and Sharon, they approached. Mom went in for a hug. I stepped back, not out of anger, just instinct. Dad gave James a stiff, awkward handshake. They said congratulations, but it felt like they were just checking a box. Sharon invited them to join us for lunch. They declined with a vague excuse about other plans. A week later, my mom texted about a celebration dinner at one of their favorite upscale places. I wasn't interested, but agreed to coffee, mostly because I was curious. We met up. It started friendly enough. Then came the real reason. They wanted to know what's next. I told them about my new full-time role at the agency. My dad's expression dropped like I'd told him I was selling candles on the street corner. Then Mom pulled out an envelope, a check. $5,000! Graduation gift, she said. I knew immediately it came with strings. They said they'd reconsidered their stance if I was willing to be reasonable again. Translation: drop James. I slid the check back across the table and said, thanks, but I'm doing fine. My dad got upset. Accused me of choosing a guy over my family. I told him this wasn't about James. It was about them trying to control me. They sat there stunned. I left. They've been blowing up my phone ever since. Mom with guilt, Dad with lectures. But I've stopped letting it get to me. James bought the bookstore. The wiring is ancient, inventory is tricky, and it's a constant uphill battle, but he's making it work. My job just gave me a pay bump. Things are still tight, but we're not drowning anymore. And here's the best part. We bought a house. Yeah, it's tiny, it creaks. The ceiling has a weird stain we can't identify, but it's ours. We scraped together a down payment, signed those papers, and started turning it into something that feels like home. James swears at DIY videos. I keep accidentally painting my hands instead of the walls. But we're building something. Last week I was just so tired of my parents' noise. So I called them on video. No warning. When they answered, I flipped the camera. Showed them my Dean's List certificate. Showed the mortgage papers with both our names. Walked outside, pointed to the bookstore with James standing there, under the new sign with his name on it. And I said, you once called him a nobody. You offered him money to disappear. This is what that nobody helped me build. No strings, no help from you, just us. My dad's face tightened. He said I was being petty. I said I was just stating facts. My mom chimed in, apologized for the dating profiles. Finally, but added she still thought we were moving too fast. I told her I'd be willing to do family things again, if they could treat James with basic respect. When my dad tried to argue again, I ended the call. Since then, radio silence. Maybe they're backing off, maybe they're regrouping. I'm not holding my breath. But what I do know is this. James and I are solid. We argue sometimes. We're tired a lot. But we're building something real. The house may be crooked. The shop might be old. But it's ours. And that feels like winning.